Guys, what's up? So this is the episode I've been trying to launch for the longest time. Actually, we did the original interview about a month ago, and now you get to finally listen to it. This is going to be one of the longest ones, and I thought about making it 2 parts, but I thought about it. I was like, I don't like doing that because then you have to wait. Let me just give you it all at once. I talked to Muslim women in architecture, and I put UK because obviously they are in the UK, but normally I don't do that. But for the next 2, I'm going to add in the locations of it, so at least you know ahead of time what continent we are on. I talked to Reem Tahin. Now in the interview you'll hear Leah, but it's also Tahin, so she goes by Leah. So we go back and forth with her name. But okay, so I have Reem, Tahin, and Zahra. So 3 women. And I hope when you listen to it, you get a sense of who's who. Now, obviously, we did this over Zoom, like video Zoom, so I see who's talking. But when I was editing, I was like, oh, snap. I hope you can identify who's speaking, because it's obviously you know my voice by now, hopefully. But the other 3 ladies that's on here, I'm hoping that you can distinguish the voices. We got political, which is exciting. Talked about capitalism and the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we talked about women in architecture and having a group specifically for that. I've been involved in women architecture programming, especially in the AIA. So we talked about having men in the space and whether that space is a safe space for you. Is it a safe space for women? If it's safe enough that you feel that you can express yourself or tell a story about an experience that you've had. We get into that a little bit. We talked about faith in God, and how praying for what you want and just allowing God to present opportunities. And we did talk about religion just a little bit. It's not the basis of the conversation. Again, it was not 2 hours about religion. It was about 4 women of color having a conversation of what it's like being in this profession. How is it like being different and not trying to assimilate and be an image that is portrayed, or the idea of what a female architect should look like. You should just be an architect, right? But again, this is not that conversation. And the 3 women presented themselves as individuals with their own specific experiences. So when I mentioned, God was talked about, and whether you believe in Jesus as your Lord and Savior, or Jesus was just a prophet, or Jesus was just a story. It's an understanding of our differences. And what I loved about our conversation was just 4 women having a conversation. And again, we acknowledge our differences, them being in the UK and me being in the US. Like, we talked about that. You will learn a lot out of this. And all of your preconceived notions about Islam, or any questions that you have, that's basic questions, I did not ask. That was not my basis. I didn't want to ask those stupid questions, because what I did was I looked stuff up and I read it and I comprehend and I understand it. And I didn't go back to them and say, hey, let me tell you what I learned on the internet. And I didn't do that. I did my research, like with any other interview that I always do. When I don't know a group, if you're a stranger, I do my research. The only thing though, and I mentioned this during the interview, is that I didn't know the people who I was talking to. I correspond with them through a DM, And so I have no idea who I was speaking to. So when I found out it was three, they were like, oh, yeah, it's going to be three of us. I'm like, oh, okay, it'll be three. So when I started talking to them, I didn't know their names. And so I had to and again, like I explained this in the interview, that I can't read. I am horrible at pronunciating. As you can see, you could probably, you're like, what did she say? It's yeah. But I usually practice saying names, and then I apologize right away because I know I'm just going to mess it up. So, but I do my research. The point is that I do my research, and all the stupid questions that I had in my head, I got that out the way to educate myself, so that I don't not sound like an idiot. Because the last thing I want is to disrespect anybody, or to make any assumptions. And I still do. I still make assumptions. But if I get corrected or whatever, or I appreciate if someone would correct me on it so that I can learn from it. But again, like, I did my research, I read up on it, and I made sure that this conversation was not concentrated on my stupid questions, because the goal of mine was to give them a platform and to promote them and to say, hey, you need to understand that there's another section. You can't just say women in architecture and do this broad stroke. You can't do that, because for a long time, it's always been white women in architecture. And so then me being a black woman, it's like, well, what about me? What are my struggles? What are my needs? So then you have black women in architecture. And then you have, okay, but, I identified myself as a brown woman. But again, like, I have my own needs, my own questions. And then there's a Muslim women in architecture. I didn't know you guys existed. I didn't know you guys had issues or struggles. Let's talk about that. Or not. Like, it was just get to know you, and let's just hit on what we have in common and talk about what we don't have in common, if that's what we want to talk about. So I really enjoyed, I don't know how many times I'm going to say this. I'll say this like 10 times. It was a pleasure talking to the three ladies, and I hope you enjoy. Okay. All right, guys. Bye. Thank you for doing this. You guys just popped up on my Instagram feed, and I was like, oh, I never thought, I never thought about any of the challenges you would face in this field. And so when I saw the formation of your group, I got really excited. And I was like, I have to talk to these ladies. I have to hear your stories. I've written down some things that I want to talk about. Basically, it's just to get to know you. Who are you? Where you're from?
The same question.
Why architecture? How was architecture school for you? And then the formation of MWA. You met at BFA, correct? Is that the story? Or no?
Well, BFA is another organization called Black Females in Architecture.
Right. So you guys were in that group, or
no? We invited one of the co-founders, Selassie, for one of our panel discussions that we organized while we were at university. And then through her, we kind of got inspired, and then it kind of moved on from there. But I mean, the discussion to have something for Muslim women existed for ages. We just didn't know how to go about it or where we would begin. But I think with BFA, it sort of made things a little bit more clear about how we could start maybe an initiative. And then from there, we start thinking about what else we could do.
So since you're the late one, I think I'm going to start with you.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Okay, as punishment. Okay. It's only fair. Okay, so Rim and I, we did our undergrad together. So I've known her since the very beginning of my architecture career. And so that was about 8-9 years ago now. And so we saw there was barely any Muslim women in the senior years of our university. And there was quite a few actually Muslim women in our year. So there was Rim, and then I'd say Rim, how many? 3, 4, maybe 7 other Muslim
8.
girls.
We were 8 Muslim girls
In our year.
9, 10. They're just coming to me now. I think we were 10.
How big was the class?
150.
Oh.
Yeah, roughly. Every year is about 100.
Yeah. So out of 150, there's only about 9 or 10 Muslim women. And then in the year above, there weren't that many Muslim women. And then, in masters, I don't think I ever saw a Muslim woman doing architecture. And so it just felt like there was no one, like an older sister or someone to go and ask for advice or anything. It's just the only other Muslim women that we knew of that was successful was Zahra Hadid. And, that was the first person that would come up on a Google search. And so it felt like, we were the only ones, but actually in reality, there's actually so many Muslim women in architecture that are successful. And this is, we're realizing this now, like years later, and we're learning about all these new Muslim architects that, they're just quietly doing their own little thing. And so Rim and I, like I said, we met in first year, and then we met Zahra in our third year. And it was only when we did our masters, and Rim and Zahra, they curated the Mega Crit in 2019, I want to say.
2019. Yeah.
2019. Zahra was the president of the Westminster Architecture Society. Yes. And Rim was the vice chair. Was it vice president? Vice president. That was
president.
So they did an amazing job of like putting this event together, and being 2 Muslim women, they were able to do that. And I felt like it was a great opportunity for them to realize that we can do more stuff like this. And a lot of other tutors were telling us that, why don't you start up a platform for Muslim women that are in architecture? And like everyone was talking about it, like the people that we knew in uni, people that we knew outside of uni, they were just saying, oh, you're so underrepresented in this industry, why don't you start something up? Everyone's saying we need this space, we need a platform, we need voices, but no one was really doing anything. And so it was only last summer, I would say, the 3 of us just started talking and, let's do something. And we just took the jump, and we applied for the London Festival of Architecture. I would say that was in around March. And so, and then, COVID happened, and we delayed, and then we did it, made it into a digital thing. But it was actually amazing, though. I think we wouldn't have reached as many women as we did if it was a physical event here in London. We've got people from, Canada, South Africa, India, Pakistan, Australia. Like, that wouldn't have happened if we'd just done a little event and a little exhibition here in London. So it's like a blessing in disguise, I'd say, that, we were allowed to do something online. It pushed us to think outside of the box, and we started off doing these majlises, and the response has been amazing. And, everyone being at home, everyone's on the internet. And yeah, I'm amazed how in just space of, I think we launched about 3 months ago, and the support that we've been getting has been incredible. So never in a million years did we think that it would in such a short period of time, and we're so excited to see where it goes in another 3 months and in time. And it's incredible. And like, for you to reach out to us, like, we're so, appreciative, like so grateful that you reached out and wanted to hear what we had to say, and we can't thank you enough. But yes, it's been amazing, like, how it's all, where we are at just in 3 months in. So that's what I have to say. And I don't know if the other 2 want to say anything else. Kind of.
Can I make a quick correction?
Yeah.
Without sounding too. It's not 3 months, dude. We started in June, like literally the beginning of June.
So,
No.
We've been talking about it for ages, but we only launched it in June.
Oh gosh, really? Oh my god.
Yeah, so the success is a lot more what do you call it?
So less than 2 months.
Less than 2 months. Yeah, less than 2 months.
Sorry, I calculated it wrong then. So less than 2 months. So amazing. I want to jinx it. So hopefully it just keeps growing. But yeah. Rim, do you want to say something?
You've said it all.
You've literally, I was just like,
And I really must, it never occurred to me until you actually said it, that it's so true. Like the whole pandemic has been, I don't want to say the pandemic has been a blessing in disguise. Obviously, that's not what I'm trying to say. But what I'm trying to say is us having to deal with it has been a blessing in disguise. The way that we've had to go digital, for example. At first, we thought, oh no, if we go digital, that means we're not going to have a, what's the word? Engaging audience, because you always think engaging with people is in physical terms, like having to see someone and talk to them, but actually we've been doing it through social media, and even better than if we were to do it in physical terms as a physical exhibition. And it's just like you said, Leah, like reaching out to all these people. I never thought that would happen myself as well. It's crazy. When we had one person say, oh, I'm from Canada, we got so excited. And then we had someone say South Africa. We're like, what? South Africa? Like, it's just...
she works for Counterspace, who is a super huge inspiration to us. They're two hijabi women who are leading the firm. And we're like, whoa, what is happening?
Yeah. And just to know as well that one of the women who runs first of all, Counterspace, obviously they're doing the Serpentine Pavilion in London. So that was a big thing for us to know that they are part of it, but also to know that one of them is a tutor at university. And going back to the idea that we never saw Muslim women, or you say visibly Muslim women who were senior to us, but not only that, we never saw them in teaching positions. So just to know that she is in that position as well kind of gives us that push, that hope, that motivation, that inspiration, that encouragement, every single positive word I could think of, just to also believe that we will, as Muslim women, also occupy these spaces and roles within the industry, hopefully soon.
You said you all met at uni, right?
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. So how was architecture education for you?
Ooh.
Zahra, do you want to go first?
Yeah.
Oh, mine. I don't know how. I mean, is it right for me to say that we all had very similar journeys in terms of architectural education? Really, lots of bumps and roads and bumpy roads and, failures and lots of crying, and just like every other architecture student, but a bit more difficult in terms of what we had to prove, because we're Muslim women, we have societal pressures in other ways, and there's we can't take too long to be in education, and there's you can't spend a lot of years in education. There's a lot of limitations in that sense. So we've had quite a few bumpy roads, I think. Some struggles with tutors, some not, some struggles with projects. And not being, I think for me, a personal struggle was just in connecting with tutors that had a very Eurocentric education. And I'm not British, and I was an international student in London. And it was a culture shock for me, I think, when I first went. And it was difficult to kind of integrate. I don't want to use the word integrate, but yeah. So
when you say culture shock, do you mean culture shock as a woman, culture shock as culturally, culture shock as what, all of the above? Is it you mentioned the education it's very Eurocentric?
I think it's perspective. When you're okay, so I grew up in Dubai, and for me, as far as I can remember, I always wanted to go to London, and I had this sort of weird image of how London would be. And I know that Dubai is a lot more, I don't know what the word, not developed, but
more of a metropolitan city.
Yeah, more of a metropolitan city. And with London, when you go there, it's almost as if it's hard to reach out to people. They're a little bit more closed off. And I mean, I quickly learned how to get into, break those boundaries. But in the beginning, it was oh, wow, I thought people would be a lot more friendly. But maybe that was just me being completely ignorant of what world was outside Dubai. I don't know. Personally, that's how I felt anyway.
I feel like that, like I experienced that as well, but being a Londoner, I've been in London my entire life. And even I face challenges like that. So I can definitely relate to what you're saying, Zahra. And yeah, I think, going into uni, it was difficult, like integrating with people in the beginning. And I think for me, it was a huge shock from going from college to uni. But that was just, I think, my struggle with the way architecture was taught. I think it could have been done in a better way. I feel like in a lot of architecture schools here in the UK, I don't know how it is in the States or in other places in the world, but it's almost like you're just thrown into the deep end and then just expected to learn how to swim. And it's very overwhelming mentally as well, more than anything. And you have to kind of really quickly learn how to compose yourself and act a certain way, or people will vilify you in like crits. They will rip you to shreds, break you down to tears, and it's nothing. And you just have to learn how to develop a thick skin. And I think trying to do that at 18, 19, it was difficult. And I have to admit, it was very challenging mentally, even throughout my architecture education. It's been like that. It was like that in undergrad, when I went back to the masters. I think it was actually a lot worse for me personally through my masters. Rim had a better experience, I'd say, for her masters. But I think, it differs. But overall, I think we all had a challenging time mentally more than anything in architecture school. And the way it's taught here in the UK, it's not very sympathetic towards how we feel mentally. I think they need to be more sensitive of what some of the tutors, they need to be a bit more sensitive about how they say things, or the criticisms that they give during a critique or a jury. It hurts. It's like especially with the arts, you're putting your interpretation of a brief, a project, and you're putting it up on a wall. You're being vulnerable. You're showing a whole room of people, this is what I think, this is what this project should be, and I want to incorporate this and this, and I want to bring these aspects. And for someone to be like, that's rubbish, that's shit, you will never make it as an architect. That is a lot. That's a lot. And to having to compose yourself and not being like breaking down into tears, it takes a lot, especially for someone, like I said, as an 18-year-old, it's a lot to be able to have that emotional strength, that mental strength to compose yourself and take it in and process what they're trying to say. Because as soon as you hear you can never make it as an architect, or your work is rubbish, you just start associating it to your self-worth. It's like, oh, so you think I'm rubbish, you think I'm, do you see what I mean? I'm talking in general terms here, but yeah, I remember in first year, my first ever crit, it was at the end of the week, so it was on a Friday, and so throughout the week I heard like all these horror stories about how everyone's first crit went. And I remember hearing one girl broke down into tears because one of the critiques told her that she'll never make it as an architect. This is her first ever crit in architecture school. It's the first jury, and this is what she's been told. So can you imagine how that would feel? Mm-hmm. How it would leave an emotional scar. And I can imagine even all these years later, she probably remembers that. And even I've never been told that as a student, thankfully, but hearing someone else experience that left an emotional scar on me. Like, oh my God, like for someone to criticize you like that openly in a room full of people, that's a lot. And I think that's what architecture school is doing wrong here. One of the many things, but I do think slowly more and more, as it's becoming a norm to talk about mental health, I feel like tutors are getting better at kind of understanding that, being a bit more sensitive. But I would say in undergrad days, it wasn't as much. I don't know what you girls think.
So my undergrad was a bit different because I've just finished my undergrad, whereas they've gotten to their masters. So I was still in undergrad when Leah and Reem were doing their masters. And for us, it was, even though we didn't have more in terms of numbers, like they had 10 Muslim women, we had like 3, maybe 4 visibly Muslim women. And almost all of them, I think what was kind of different was the ones that were in my batch, they would leave as soon as studio ended. because they had to go home. Like they had family back home that really did not let them kind of stay over. It wasn't safe for them to go because they lived far away from the city. Whereas I lived close by to uni, so I could kind of go back and forth really easily, and I could stay quite late in studio. And when I'm working, there's no other Muslim woman that is present. It's just, well, I mean, I don't want to be rude, but white people. I mean, I don't know. Like I'm trying to be as careful as possible, which yeah. But I had a point to make about you can never make it as an architect, because I heard the same thing during, not one of my personal crits, but I was watching someone else's crit, and she was a Muslim woman, visibly was a Muslim woman. And she had her project on, and this was a practitioner, not like a tutor. This was a practitioner from outside. And he sat there and he's like, are you sure you want to do architecture? Like, it wasn't even like, you're never going to be, like, there was no statement. I feel like the other statement kind of pushes you a little, like, I need to prove you wrong. Whereas this is like a cynical sort of, you know, are you sure? Like, I'm coming from a good place, but am I really coming from a good place? Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It was probably like, I was really offended for her. I almost wanted to stand up and say, that's not how you should be speaking to her. I understand you're a practitioner, but come on, we're all here to learn.
Rim?
I'm going to go back a step back to my early days at Westminster with remembering Leah and some points that she mentioned. But my take on it is that Westminster is a very diverse university, so they get a lot of international students. And I remember starting as a British Syrian Muslim. I don't know how to describe myself, but let's just say that. My parents were born in Syria, and they came, and then I was born in London. So my father never went to university, and my mum didn't finish her degree, although she did go. So they really did push me to go to university and continue with my education. And for me, obviously we spoke Arabic at home all the time, and then my English wasn't really strong, even though I was born here and I went to school. I had my education, but it still wasn't as strong. So then you had all these international students coming in, and they've a lot of them have had, you know, what are they called? Not boarding schools, but they've had a bit of a stronger education than me. I went to estate schools, for example, whereas state schools, sorry. Whereas obviously they've come from a slightly better education system. So they would all come and they would all use their fancy words and charming ways when doing their crits, and it was intimidating for me at first, I'm not gonna lie. And I felt like for me, my biggest challenge was standing up to these international students whose parents had an education at university, and they had someone in their family who had been to university, and they kind of knew what they were doing, whereas I was the first of a kind from my family, and I was kind of, I wouldn't say lost, but it was a bit of a challenge. So for me, that was my first challenge. And then so within it came many challenges, which is my spoken English had to improve a lot. So obviously if I was to kind of play a mental memory in my brain of how my presentation skills and talking skills have evolved over the years, there's definitely, I've definitely put that as one of my priorities within my, whilst I was at architecture school, that I need to definitely up my presentation and speaking skills. And I feel like that's a big thing for us that we always say, I don't know, I mean, Leah and Zahra would agree, but I always talk about this with Leah, that the way we talk about our projects,
yeah,
it needs to be, you know, the confidence needs to be there, because sometimes we, like you were saying, Leah, we stand up there and we're really vulnerable about the work that we have, but just having that confidence and knowing your terminology and doing your reading, and that's all part of developing as an intellectual and in the academic field. So for me, that was a big thing. And also going back to that whole maybe architecture isn't for you, yes, I've had it as well, and I struggled during I think for me the biggest shock was going from first year to second year, where they automatically expected you to know how to do things just because you've done 1 year in architecture, when really I've just about scraped through that year. And yeah, it's taking you to an office and kind of staring down at you and saying, so tell me what's going on, and breaking into tears and saying, oh, I don't know, I just don't want to be here, I don't want to be in your studio. And it's like, but you have to be here. It's like, but I want the others. Because we have different studio groups, you see, so a lot of the times what happens is, even if that's not your studio choice, you just find yourself in that studio, and then you're doing work that you don't want to do, about a brief you don't want to. For example, the brief I had to do was design an interface between an animal and a human at London Zoo, and I just didn't get it. For me, I wanted to go down a cultural route, coming from a cultural background, for example, whereas all the white students, they were really like thriving in that project because, I don't know, they just did. But so yeah, I mean, where I see myself, Leah mentioned that I had a better experience in my master's, and that's because I went into a studio that particularly focused into cultural issues in the Middle East or in contested spaces. So I was able to do research about a project which meant something to me as an architect. I was finding my identity within the field, and I was kind of relating it to my personal issues, and for that reason I was able to do well in that project. And I'm not saying I'm not trying to like push for the idea that you should always stay in your comfort zone, but I definitely think that you should find something that you like and are interested in, so that you can achieve the best you can in the work that you do. Yeah, I feel like I've touched upon a lot of things. I've just jumped from.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Including, so you need to find something that you like, but you also need to find a tutor that will be celebrating what you like as well. Because I tried in one of my studios, which the brief was very vague and it was very vast, so I kind of fit it to what I liked, but my tutor was very dry, to say the least. And for them, it was just about getting a project out and, you know, just do some artsy stuff and get it over with. You just need to pass. That was kind of the mentality. So I was coming from, oh, there are so many communities here. There's so much culture here. Let's try to bring all of the community together. Let's do this. Let's make this. And while I was explaining my project, she just looked at me and she said, why are you making this so complicated? And I said, it's not complicated. It's just different. Like, it's just more rich in culture. I don't know how else to explain. Yeah. And I think with just that one sentence and that reaction, it was overreaction. It just kind of, I don't know, I didn't want to do my project anymore almost. Like it was really difficult to get through that year.
I want to go back a little bit. So starting with Rem, why did you pick architecture?
I picked architecture because, well, initially I was really into the whole arts and design. And if it wasn't for architecture, maybe I would have gone into fine art. I mean, that's why I always said to my mom, I want to do fine art. But my mom, being a cultural mother, said, no, you can't do that, because that's not gonna, what's that? You know, that's a hobby. You can't study fine art. You have to do something else that will make you money, something that will give you stability. That was her idea.
Lol.
Like a doctor, a lawyer or something, right?
Yeah. So I was like, fine. Okay. So I looked into it a bit more, but I've always had an interest for space, you know, like how certain spaces can make you feel certain ways. From a young age, my father, he used to always take us to galleries and exhibitions, and I always experienced these kind of spaces from a young age. So they had an effect on me. Like, they brought back certain memories to me. I remembered certain things. I made associations. So that was, I really liked how certain spaces can have that impact on me. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice if I could design spaces in the future that can have positive impact on people's memories or their lives or whatever it is. And then I really had a kind of like political interest. So a lot of my art that I used to do in school had I would look a lot into the Palestinian cause, and I really made sure that my artworks made certain statements. So I was really into Banksy, for example. And then I thought, wouldn't it be nice if I could find out if there is any architectural practices out there which incorporate politics of architecture? And that's when I came across Palestine Regeneration Team, which is led by Nasser Golzari and Yara Sharif, who also run the practice Golzari NG Architects, who I'm currently doing my part-time with. And when I came across them, I thought, okay, that's it. This is what I'm going to work towards. I want to do architecture which challenges these what's the word? These kind of situations, these kind of conditions that are happening, you know, the conflicts, and whether it be a societal or literal physical conflict or whatever it is. So that was one thing that I was really interested in. So yeah, I went ahead and I thought, this is it. I'm going to use architecture as a tool to try and challenge these issues globally that are taking place globally. And then when I did get into architecture school, I remember I went with Leah to one of the lectures during our undergrad, and Nasser was actually giving a lecture at the University of Westminster, and I thought, wow, perfect. And I went up to him and I said, I've done my research and I've come across your practice, and I would love, and I literally looked down at him, I was like, I'd love to. And I think I freaked him out at first, and he was like, oh, well, thank you, but no, not on this occasion. Like, fine. And then I went through second year, and second year I actually failed that year and I had to retake it. So when I was retaking it, the batch that I started with had a year above me, and they were doing their work experience. We have to do 2 weeks at a practice. And someone that was in my studio in that year, I heard him say, Nasser, and I literally sprinted across the studio. I was like, I heard you say this name, and I just want to let you know that I'm interested. And then after that, what he did was when he was in practice, they needed to get something printed, and I was working at the print shop at the university, and he said, oh, Rim, they need to get something printed. Do you want to do it for them? Maybe that's a good place for you to kind of like establish something with them. So I said, fine. And I did it. And they came and they took it and they thanked me. And they said, we've got this thing happening for Gaza, Open Gaza, with the late Professor Michael Sorkin. Do you want to join us on it? And I said, what? Yes, of course. And then I went, and then they said, do you want to do a project for it? And I said, what? Yes. And then they said, do you want to, organize the symposium? And I said, no, come on, you must be kidding. Like, what's going on? I was like, of course. And it just kept getting better from there. I did my year out with them, and then I went back to Westminster. They started teaching there. I did my 2 years, my part 2 years with them, came out, and they've really been supportive and encouraged me throughout my whole career. They've taken me on, taught me so much, been patient with me. I've become a researcher for the Palestine Regeneration Team, which is literally what made me want to go into architecture in the first place. And to think that I'm now part of that is amazing. And it's just basically just to show like how everything will fall into place eventually. But it's just, if you have a dream and you really want to do something, just to go for it. And yeah, I've been around took part with them in the Chicago Architecture Biennale, which was in collaboration with Rawaq, which is an organization in Palestine. And then we did the Berlin Film Festival and just so many other things. But yeah, I'll stop there. But that's my journey.
That's amazing. Like, that's, wow. So you just sprint across the studio and you heard. And
yeah, I heard a name and I was like, I must. And yeah, that was because of Ibil, who was my classmate at that time. He was so nice. Just also like something to note on, just encouraging each other and uplifting each other. It's not a competition. Like, we're not all trying to race each other to get to the finish line. We all want to do good. And if I know that I can help someone out, or just do one little thing, like all he had to do was tell them she can print your work for you, and then things took off from there. So it's really the little things that one little spark can just create the biggest change in someone else's career. So, and I think that also goes back to what MWA wants to do. It's just, we're not here to change someone's life we're not here to create massive how shall I explain this? Basically what I'm trying to say is, I think that's one little thing. Yeah, one little thing we can do, hopefully, even if it's a tiny thing, but hopefully that will create a massive impact in someone's career. So yeah.
I don't know how you ladies gonna top Rim's story, but
there's no way. Trust me, she's definitely got the best story out of all of us.
Alhamdulillah, yeah. It's all, I mean, for me personally, and this is one thing where faith also plays part of this organization, which is we have strong faith in God. For example, like we do our prayers, we ask for God to guide us and provide us with the things that we want. I mean, that's me talking on a personal level, but for me, I really do have strong faith that if it wasn't for God's plans, things wouldn't have worked out like that the way they did. So I always use the phrase Alhamdulillah, so all praise to God for the way that things have worked out.
Leah, do you want to go?
Me.
So
okay, my story isn't as amazing, unfortunately, but it is a very similar beginning. So from a young age, I had a love for art and design. As long as I can remember, seeing my mom always, making little things, like crocheting things or sewing things, or learning how to, bake a cake, new sort of cake or something. So it's always like learning new skills and designing things, and I saw that throughout my entire childhood, my mom doing that, and obviously I picked those up, making things, doing little craft stuff at home. And when I went into school, really enjoyed my design and technology classes. So it would start off where you would, design something on paper, you would draw out, I don't know, it was a little trinket box you're making. So you would draw it out on paper, do all the measurements, and you look at the materials and how it will be used, and like come up with different versions of how the trinket box would look like. And then it was a process of going and making this. And so it was trial and error, making this thing. And I enjoyed this so much that it was the beginning of my secondary school education. And I still remember this. It was probably like 15 plus years ago. And I still remember this. It was this one project in particular. And I loved doing it. And that whole process, I thought, I would love to do this for the rest of my life. The process of putting something on paper, designing something on paper, and then seeing it being physically made. I love that concept. And so at one point I thought, maybe I could go into product design and all that, but then I thought that's too small. But I really liked fine arts and visual arts, and I wanted to go down that route as well. And I thought, okay, so how can I combine the two, but in a bigger scale? And so I don't know, like my parents were like, oh, you can never make it as an artist. Or not just my parents, like my family in general, is like they wanted me to either become a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. I never had an interest in medicine, never had an interest in, well, I almost went into law. If I hadn't gone into architecture, I probably would have gone into law, but then it was like, there's no design aspect to that. But that thought process is no kind of thinking. I went down the design route, and so engineering and then art kind of combined it together. And I thought, oh, maybe architecture. And at first I thought architecture is just, you're just designing buildings and there's nothing to it. But I started doing my research, and I realized that there's architectural interventions that can actually have positive impact for the people, the community, and it can have a deeper meaning than just a little block. So I thought, okay, I want to become an architect I want to create architecture that is like a piece of art. It has more meaning to it than what you see. So more than just a facade, more than just there's more to it, and you get more from it. It helps the community, it helps the people, it helps the environment. I'm really into looking at how buildings can enhance biodiversity in a community or in an area, not just people. I also like how a building can impact the climate, just kind of creating a structure that is like beneficial for all, in literally all. So people, animals, the plants, the climate, everything. So just kind of creating this sort of organism that is just like, does so much. And so, yeah, that is my ambition, like kind of doing projects like that in the future. And so now I've been fortunate to be working with an architecture practice that looks at social housing here in London. And They do a lot of work with the local councils. I think the equivalent to social housing. Do you understand when I mean?
Yeah. It'll be like public housing
or like the projects in America. I feel like projects like that need a lot of thought process in it, because it's not fair to just chuck like a bunch of people into a shoebox of a house, like a building, because they're people as well. Just because they are less fortunate than, you know, the upper class or whatever, they're still people. They deserve to have good homes. They deserve to have a good quality of life living in the city. And so I think being a part of that design process, I feel it like is very rewarding, and being able to be a part of that conversation and putting my, you know, input in these discussions, and, you know, we could do this, we could do that. And so I work with this practice called ArchitectureDoingPlace, and I've been with them for almost a year now. I would say I always had an interest in looking at how you can better a community and how I can create spaces. In the practice that I'm in, the principal architect, David Uganmiwa, he's been incredible. He's always listened to everything that I've said and, you know, tried to incorporate it into the design. And I feel very valued as an architect in training. My previous employees have been amazing, but they just didn't have that kind of funding or that kind of wiggle room for me to think outside of the box. It was more private residential projects where it was small scale projects, but no, I got a lot of experience through that. I, you know, picked up so many skills from those previous practices, but now, like, I feel like I'm actually getting into the really good projects, and I feel like projects that I'm working on now would make some significant difference for communities. It has been difficult, I'm not gonna lie. You feel like a bad person sometimes, like you go into these communities and people don't like change, so, you know, it's the fear of the unknown, and we're not the bad people. And I completely understand where they're coming from, because there's so much gentrification that's going on here in and around London. People just think, oh, you're an architect, you're an engineer, you're a developer, you're all the same. You just want to take away our spaces, take away our homes, and just leave us the crumbs. You know, that's how it's become here in London, unfortunately. You know, people are thinking about how can they benefit. You know, like, you knock this building down and then I'm going to put luxury apartments up, because in London, if I could do that, I can get like 1.5 million for one flat. And I could go off a tangent on this. Rim and Zahra knows I have very strong feelings about this. It's just
on our majlis.
Yes,
the strong feelings are on our majlis.
Yeah. It's so unethical, the stuff that they're doing. Some of the developers, not all of them are bad, but majority are doing this. And I feel like it's so unfair for the existing communities. They're just breaking up these communities and making them even more dysfunctional. They weren't dysfunctional, but, you know, there's this thing where a lot of architects, a lot of engineers, they kind of have this God complex. They think, oh, stand from the outside, they think, oh, we know what's wrong. You know, I think this, you know, community is not doing well. You've got a lot of, you know, crime going on. You know what? We're going to do a good thing. We're going to help you out, and we're going to put money in, and we're going to make this community better. We didn't ask you for help, though. These communities don't. Probably there's a few issues. You can work with existing community and, you know, make it better. But no, instead, these developers are knocking down estates and stuff completely, you know, like cleaning it out and then putting something new in. It's like, this is better for you now because we think that's better for you. And I think it's so unethical to do that, because just because they're from working class backgrounds, are they not people? Do they not have a right to live in the city? Do they not have a right to voice what they want? They are existing communities in that area, and instead you're knocking those down so that you can make a profit. And in the end, these apartments that are going up, you know, Londoners can't afford them, professionals can't afford them, because it's just ridiculously expensive. And it's like £500,000. Who has that kind of money? And it's like, it's just become almost, you know how you've got in America, you've got the American dream. You go get an education, then you buy a house and a nice car and all that. Everyone's striving for that American dream. But in the UK, you have something similar. I don't know what the equivalent would be, like the British dream, this illusion, this kind of carrot that if you go and get an education, you can buy a house, you can get an amazing job, you can have a car, this, that, whatever. But in reality,
That's capitalism, Leah.
yeah, exactly. yeah. But it's
Doesn't exist in London, only exists everywhere.
but
Actually, we could blame you guys. You can blame England for the capitalism because you guys brought it over here. So.
Oh,
Yes, I
damn.
agree. I mean, probably because they colonized the entire world anyway. So, you know, I'm assuming that capitalism only exists because England exists.
But surely, are you really going to capitalize on people's lives, like where they live?
That's what the entire world is
But
doing.
how is that
now.
ethical though? But that's so unethical though.
But it is the truth.
And why?
Jeremy Corbyn said stop, and they're not listening to him, and he was about to become our prime minister. They took the piss out of him, and if he couldn't push for that, I don't know. I just sound so cynical and kind of, what's the word? Pessimistic. That's the word. But yeah, honestly, there's no hope. Sorry.
You know, it's interesting how the same thing that you were just talking about, I was talking about my previous interview. I'm going off topic, but this is great because it's political and architecture is political, right? The post-architecture and mapping segregation. So in the district, DC, the capital of the United States of America, there was this migration, and some of the Black folks that live down south. So you have the United States, and then you have where you have the East Coast, the Atlantic Ocean, the closest to you guys. Some of the Blacks wanted more opportunities, so they go up north. There was a lot of work in the district, and Black people would move up. So they created these things called, not created, but they labeled it as alley towns. So this is like little shacks or whatever. And this is where the Black community was living. Now, they didn't have running water or, you know, it was the shacks, basically, that they made up. And it was little alleys, tiny little homes. The alley towns were closest to the water, like the harbor, waterfront. And the second area is where I'm investigating and eventually where I lived, grew up and stuff. So DC decided to have this plan called the urban renewal. And this was like, I don't know if this was happening in London or not, but this was like a US based thing. So it was exactly what you're saying, except this was like 50s, let's say 50s, 60s, around that time, that they began this implementation of clearing these alley towns out. So some Black people own their land. Some Black folks own their land. And through eminent domain, the city took the property. And they did this whole like urban renewal project called Southwest 1. And it was like, it's by the water and stuff. And it was this female architect, this famous female architect that did it. And then DC got sued because they took people's land. And there was a lot of political bad issues around that. So then when they did Northwest 1, where I eventually grew up, they took a different route, but there was still protests. They were, you know, taking land and so forth. So the woman that I was talking to, she is mapping. So when I say mapping segregation, during that time, when back in the 30s, when they have all these Black people moving up, in order for you to sell your property, they had deed restrictions. And part of the deed restriction was you can't sell this property to Black people. And this is legal at the time. And it was passed on, if you want to sell your property, in this deed restriction, you can't sell it to Black people. And then there was this Fair Housing Act of the 1960s, 68, I think, that she mentioned and made it illegal. But some of these deeds still had that restriction. They couldn't enforce it, but it was still. So she's mapping out. There's literally areas in DC that at one point in time, Black people were not allowed to buy the land. So then she was mapping public housing. So I grew up in public housing, and come to find out that the person who designed the public housing was the same woman that designed the Southwest 1. And I was shocked by that, because I was like, a woman. First of all, she was a woman, a white woman, but she was a woman nonetheless, and she designed this. And then the second thing, I found out that the church, the Catholic Church, Baptist Church, like that whole area, the developers were a Baptist church, and it was named after a pastor. So during like the 60s, when they were developing this, it was good intentions. Like I saw the plans, and like she did a great job. Like, and the other architects that worked on the other area, because it was like an acre of land or something. I'm saying an acre, but it's big. Like it was a big settlement. And I was completely surprised by that, because it was a good intention. So the architect, the design was sweet. It was thoughtful. And you're like, what happened? And one of the things that they did too, part of the deed covenant or whatever, was they put a restriction saying that only low income residents could live here, or a percentage of low income residents. So they knew ahead of time that they didn't want developers coming and try to take the land from low income people. So that expired, like, let's say maybe like 5-10 years ago, and it's getting gentrified basically. And
so they're knocking these buildings down then?
Some of the sections have been knocked down, and they're building these ugly buildings, mixed income, right? So part of the deal is you're going to allow, like, let's say you displaced 100 people. They're like, okay, well, we're going to allow these 100 people back in. But it's like an 1,100 unit apartment complex. So you displace them. You say, on top of that, you can't go to jail. You can't have any charges on you, whether it's marijuana, felony, misdemeanor. You have to have a perfect record for as long as you've been out in order for you to get back in. So it's, I mean,
okay, that's just another level. I don't think that it's like that here in the UK. I mean, this is just another way of like controlling people. What is this? How is there things that are being done to better this, or people just accept?
I mean, this is advocates out there that are, dealing with this, and including the church. Like the church has always been in there. And that's another thing that amazes me. Like you have the Baptist church, which is a Black church. You have the Catholic church that's there.
It's like, doing stuff like this is unethical, and how they're allowing stuff like this. Where's the morals and ethics in all this? Why aren't they having a say?
Well, it's the concept, right? We have HUD as Housing and Urban Development Secretary, who believes that if you pull yourself from the bootstraps, that you can get yourself out of poverty, and that you are leeching off the system, and the system was only meant to have you for a certain amount of time. So it's kind of like the concept of public housing is temporary housing. You're down on your luck, but you need to get yourself back up and be at market rate like everybody else. That's the concept, thought process of it. And this is me, right? This is where I get conflict with what this profession is about, because on the one hand, you kind of see that point, unfortunately, right? That you have generations of individuals, you have generations of families who have been on the system, right? And it was like, because my mom's a single mom, she made the decision to get off that system. And even the amount of money that she's making is still below the poverty level. But she was fortunate enough to have 2 daughters that supports her, so she doesn't have to pay rent, or she doesn't have to, she's okay. She's taken care of because she has daughters who got an education and whatever. But there are families who don't. There are families who produce children, and they see that their mom is a single mom, and then they have children, and they get on the system because they see their moms on the system. And so it's this cycle that they have. I recognize that cycle. On the other hand, I don't believe that you don't throw people on the street and tell them to figure it out either. Like, you don't do that. Like, that's the inhumane part. You're not teaching them. And then also it's a system. So when they were taking away these homes, they were telling Black people, hey, we're taking your home, but you can move back in. And in order for you to move back in, it's public housing. You have to understand that Black people didn't just fall into public housing. They were like, hey, we're going to take your home away. And in exchange, we're going to put up this brand new building. This building is called public housing. In order for you to get it back, you have to, fill out this form, list your income, and then move in. Oh, by the way, we're changing these rules. You can't be married, because if you combine your income's too much.
What?
Yes. Like, and so it's like, when you don't know, then you're like, okay. And so you see the division of the Black family, like, systematically slavery, right? It's a continuation. I mean, it's welcome to America.
Disgusting, honestly.
I have no words.
It's
I'm in shock, and oh wow, I'm still processing this. Okay, and I thought it was bad here in the UK, and so wow, it's just another level there.
Yeah, it is. It really is. It really is. And that's why you have to protest. That's why we are constantly protesting. This is why it's like, we're just fed up. And through like systematic racism, policing of space, they would go into these areas where Black and brown people are congregated in, and they would police that space. Because again, it's kind of like, you are poor, you are down, you are uneducated. I'm going to teach you how to be. And then it's a psychological thing. And this whole thing is a psychological. Again, with the conflict of being in this profession. And I realized that architecture is part of the justification. Is just, we are the reason why this is happening. Like, it's kind of traumatic. It's and it's about me. It's about you. Why am I talking?
This is interesting. No, please. Don't stop. No.
It's not about me. It's about you.
No.
It's about us, women in architecture. We're sharing our experiences. Come on.
Architecture is political, remember?
Yes.
Whatever you're saying is essentially, I mean, obviously, there's no way we can compare to those struggles, but in some ways, what you're saying about conflict and architecture and being in this profession, it reminds me so much of the conflicts that I have, because when I started architecture, when I chose to do architecture, I'm talking about me now, and I was supposed to bring it back to Melissa, but like, it's really funny that Reem and Leah said that they chose to do art first, and then architecture was sort of their option to kind of get into art in some ways, or like, it was acceptable for them by their parents to do architecture instead. For me, it was, I wanted to do architecture, and I had to convince my parents that I wanted to do architecture. So please let me do architecture, because it was seen as something that doesn't make money, is kind of useless. There are people who know how to build already. Why are you going to be an architect? I had my grandmother once ask me, so I was already in university. She was like, "What are you studying?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm doing architecture," and she speaks Malayalam, so I had to translate, and I didn't know what I was stuck at Malayalam, so I didn't know what the word was, and I was like, "Oh, I essentially design homes, like I built houses." She's like, "Oh, your grandpa knew how to do that, but he didn't go into university." And I was like, "Ouch." So yeah, there was a lot of conflict in the sense of, why do you want to start a profession that isn't going to be beneficial in any way? Why don't you just be a doctor or an engineer? Also there's this idea of a Muslim woman, not just a Muslim woman, but any woman being on site, on construction sites, it's difficult for them. It's heavy lifting. It's not acceptable in some ways. And then I think someone's randomly said that, "Oh, you can be an architect by staying at home. You can stay at home and do drawings." So architecture is the right profession for you because you can stay at home essentially after you get married. And when you have a family, you can stay at home, take care of the kids, do the stuff that you need to do, the role that you need to play. And then if you want to do a side thing, drawing up stuff in the house, that's fine. And this is random family. This isn't like my parents. You know, my parents eventually kind of understood my passion for it and then, you know, really encouraged me. Like my dad would, every second that I see him, he's like, Zaha Hadid, remember, Zaha Hadid. I'm like, she's not the only architect, Dad. She's not the only architect, chill. But it's like, it's the idea of like, you know, you need to aim as high as you can to get where you want. Like, don't stop yourself. But it took them time to kind of understand that because they come from a background where this wasn't acceptable or this wasn't easy. You know, they didn't grow up with that sort of understanding that women just can have these professions. My mom isn't, like, she didn't go to university. She just went to college. So college is like +1, +2, 11th year and 12th year. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how to.
12 and 13.
We don't do 13 years. We do 12 years and then end it. Yeah.
So I think it's the equivalent of American, like senior year.
Yeah, around that time. Yeah. I mean, I had the opportunity. I did architecture school. No, I didn't do architecture school. I did a year of architecture school in Dubai, in an American university. So it was very American, like all of the history was very American. And I was like, and then I just suddenly shifted to the UK. And it was like everyone kind of understood UK history and UK architecture typology, social housing, all of that stuff. And I'm just like, I don't know what's going on. I didn't have any art background, no art history background. It was just biology, maths, chemistry, physics. So like, yeah, I guess that was also part of the culture shock that I was talking about earlier. Like I had no idea what I was doing. So everyone was saying money making is important. And I was like, when I started architecture, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be totally like that, you know, amazing architect person that makes all the money. I can do it. And then I went through architecture school, started studying history. And I was like, no, that's definitely not what I'm going to do. That is not why I need to be an architect. You know, there's already plenty of those. We need to rethink your entire value system.
Wait, so they teach you about money? Like what?
No. As in people around me were saying, like my family members, friends, they were talking about making money and the business side of things. And they don't teach you how to make money in architecture school.
No.
It's like,
I just want to make sure.
They don't even teach you how to like take care of yourselves in architecture school. They just tell you need to design a bunch of things and then expect you to work your butt off all through these years, and then you're just going through several mental health crises at the same time. And yeah,
there's definitely that no appreciation to someone's money as well. Like for example, how can I explain this is by printing your portfolio at the end of the year, and it's kind of like you spend hundreds and hundreds of pounds to print, and they say, you know what, maybe it's good you print 2 copies as well, one for yourself and one for us. And it's like, okay, so I thought architecture was sustainable, but not only is it not sustainable, but it's also like draining my pockets as well. And then at the end, it's like, okay, the end. And I mean, I remember also in first year, they gave us a whole list of things that we had to buy, like really, really fancy materials and like a certain portfolio and plastic sleeves to put our papers in. And then when we submitted, they said, why did you get these plastic sleeves? Bin them. They're really annoying to look at because they create a glare. Like, well, you told me to buy them. You gave me a list and I actually went out. And I don't know, this whole money aspect as well. It's very
education is a business,
conflicting. But I went into architecture knowing that it doesn't make money. Someone said to me, they sat me down, they're like, it was in secondary school. She said, you know that it's very low paying. And I said, that's fine. I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it to create change. So.
Oh yeah, same. I said that I didn't care if it didn't give me money. At the end of the day, I want to do what I want to do and I'm interested in it. So I'm going to go for it. But then there was a part of me that wanted to prove everyone wrong because they were questioning and criticizing my decision so much, kind of saying that you don't know any better, you know, you need to change your decision. And there were lots of points in my sort of education where I was kind of asked to, you know, not blatantly, but there were undertones of being asked to reconsider my entire education. And I was like, no, this is still what I want to do. I know I'm failing, but, you know, I'll push through and eventually we'll get there. So yeah, I don't know. But in terms of the money, the people printing, I remember we not rallied, but because when I was president for Architecture Society, there were so many meetings that we were doing with staff, tutors, you know, the fabrication lab, the higher ups, heads, and they would all ask us like, what do the students want? I'm like, the students want to be able to pay for their shit. Like, you know, stop asking us to print for crit for, you know, several versions of portfolios. These people, like, I mean, I was privileged enough to not have to worry about money as much, but I had friends who were working 3 jobs and trying to finish their portfolio at the same time. And I'm just like, how do you expect the education model that existed 20 years ago when you don't actually, you had maybe 1 part-time job or like a couple of like students, maybe 2, 3 in the year that were actually doing part-time jobs. But now like 90% of them are working at the same time. How are you not accommodating that in your education? I don't get it. Like, change with the system, change with the, you know, I don't know.
And going back again to the whole sustainability thing, like we have, you know, we're all about, architecture is all about developing and becoming more, you know, keeping up with technologies. And what's wrong with a screen where I could just put my USB in and plug it in and then you can look at my work through there? I mean, I understand it's different when you have it printed out and you can see the lines, but for something that's so provisional and in the process, yeah.
And the pandemic is testament to that. Everything was online this year, right? Like
submissions, even the exhibition
even the
is
exhibition
online.
was a virtual online exhibition. Like, I mean, it was like a 3D tour. Like, I mean, you know, that was, it baffled me that we weren't allowed to be submitting digitally before. Like, if there's a choice, like, at least there should be a choice, you know, at least for people that can't afford to print and like 20-25 pages of a portfolio, or print smaller. We print A2s and A1s for our portfolio. We're not allowed to print A3s. And it's like, it's double the money. I mean, I don't know. We're going on a very like small, crazy tangent, but you know.
Okay, so I'm gonna steer everybody back.
Yeah.
So, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So you're out of school. Well, some of you, are you all out, right?
Oh,
Well, yeah.
Currently, I mean, I still have a year left to do for my diploma before I'm chartered. So I think I might do that this year or maybe the year after, but at the moment I'm working.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rim's in the same position as me, and Zahra has her master's and diploma still to do, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to switch now to your newly found 2-month-old organization. So one of the things that you guys were doing, and I want to apologize in advance, I'm really bad at reading and pronunciation. So forgive me if I pronounce your name wrong or I pronounce something incorrectly. So you're doing Marsha? Did I say that right? Mejlis. Okay. Yay! Okay. For a series, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what is it? Like, educate me on this. And it's about spaces, right?
Safe spaces.
Safe spaces. Okay.
So Mejlis. Oh, sorry, Zahra. Do you want to?
No, you're better.
No, I'm not better. I'm just gonna. Okay.
No,
you know what?
I was gonna say, I really want to explain. I was literally gonna say that.
All right. Well, Mejlis is It's a Persian and it's an Arabic term for a meeting space where people from the community come together in an open space and they sit down and they discuss certain pressing issues. And usually these people they could be, most of the times there would be, for example, like someone from a mosque or a mayor or just someone from the community, with community members as well. And we really liked that idea of, it's kind of what we wanted to do as well. I mean, what we wanted to do was a space where people come together and they discuss their issues, like us Muslim women in architecture, we come together. I mean, because we always used to do this between ourselves. Like the definition of majlis was what we used to do between ourselves in architecture studios or over the phone, or when we used to go out to do a picnic in the park, and then somehow would end up talking about these issues anyways, because we're so passionate about them. So we thought, okay, wouldn't it be nice if we actually use that term to actually put a label on what we're doing with the discussions that we're having? So we thought, okay, let's have a online majlis, a virtual majlis, because ideally what would have been nice was for the majlis to take place, for example, in a coffee shop or somewhere public maybe. But when the pandemic happened, since we actually launched during the pandemic as well, we've had no other choice but to go virtual. So what we're doing is online majalis, plural of majlis. We're doing online majalis via Zoom. And what we do is we are doing it as part of the London Festival of Architecture, and the theme of it is power. So we sat down together and we thought, okay, what are we going to do about it? And we thought, wouldn't it be good to do it about safe spaces or just spaces, how women, Muslim women or women interact with their cities. And we thought, okay, wouldn't it be nice if we did every single week of the month? So of the month. So we would have 4 weeks, and that means 4 majalis. So each week would have a topic, and that's when we thought unsafe spaces, safe spaces, gender and space, and the fourth one, which is the future of safe spaces. And what we did was we tried to think of how we could engage everyone in these discussions, and we only thought it was right that we do some reading and we actually educate ourselves about these 4 topics, because we only thought that, okay, we'll definitely have something to say even if we didn't do any reading, but it would be nice if there was some sort of basis to our theories maybe that we had. So that's kind of, we put up so we made a drive for everyone to get access to, because part of MWA is to also share the knowledge that we have. So we thought it would be good to get those books or articles that we came across, or films or videos, whatever it is, and make it accessible for everyone else so that they could also have access to them. And so every week we put up some materials that we've come across, and we encourage people to share their resources, and we open up the discussion by posing some questions to the audience that we feel would be good based on the readings that we've made. And we do get people actually engaging with these questions on our posts, which is nice. And then that kind of goes forward within the discussions that we have at the end of the majlis, which takes place after we've had our special guests present their work, which relates to the themes. So in the first week we had Nuria Malik, Zahra Patan and Noha Hansen presenting their part 2 projects that they did at different universities in London, which related to the theme of unsafe spaces. And then in the second week, again, it was myself, Tahin, and Neda Sultani who presented her work, which was under the theme of oasis in the city, which we felt related to the theme of safe spaces. And then last week we had 5 special guests, which we realized was actually we've previously had 3 special guests, so this last week it was 5, and we thought, wow, that was very intense, because the discussion afterwards lasted for 2 hours.
2 hours.
We had a 3-hour majlis, and usually it's been 2 hours maximum.
An hour and a half.
Yeah. So that was really interesting. We had film screenings, and it was about it was a film screening by Tahin Khan from Pakistan, and then we had Fatima from Sheffield, who's from Iranian background, and we had Ali, which was really nice to have her because she's not a Muslim woman in architecture, but her project looked into, her approach comes from feminism. She's a feminist, so her work's very driven in that sense, and she had a lot to say about what we were discussing as well, which was really nice. And then we had as well Jawdat Adnan from Canada, who we actually never met before. The only time we met her was in the first two majlis, and that's how we met her. And she told us that she would like to get involved, and she sent her CV and portfolio. She told us about her dissertation, and she was really involved in the discussions, and we thought, wouldn't it be amazing to have her on as part of our special guest. And also we had Shukri Sultan from After Party Zine, which is an amazing group of people who have set up in London from BAME backgrounds, and they do really amazing work. And she did a presentation about her experience within her personal experience in female prayer spaces and mosques, which was amazing. And so much discussion took place afterwards, and we had to end it. It was like, okay guys, it's really great, but it's time to go, and hopefully we'll carry on. And
I was like, it's 2:30 a.m. I need to go to sleep, guys. Let's go.
I didn't want the discussion to end, though. It just got better and better.
Yep. And the nice thing is people get more confident and open up, and they kept saying, can I also say something in the chat? Can I also say that? Said, of course you can, of course. And it was really nice. It was really nice to have those discussions and to meet new faces. Every week we meet new faces, and we have males also joining us. And actually there was going to be a Muslim male who was going to join us, but he couldn't. But we were actually going to engage him in the discussion and see his take on what he thought about safe spaces for Muslim women, but also safe spaces for Muslim men, because it would be nice to know what the male kind of thought is on that. So we're opening it up gradually to also the male gender to be involved in as well, which would be nice.
Sorry, go on.
How would that dynamic work? Because I'm an advocate for like women in architecture. I've done like a couple of things, and we've always been inclusive, like whoever wants to show up. But also too, should I watch what I say when you open it up with men? So was there any thought?
Zahra always says we need to be careful. You have to say this, Zahra. You have to explain this bit.
I mean, so the thing is, we started doing Muslim women so that Muslim women could have a space to speak more, because what we find is that we lack a lot of confidence in speaking our opinion, saying things that we're interested in, etc. And one of the things that we talked about initially was that maybe the majlis is only for Muslim women so that they have an opportunity to just discuss whatever they wanted. And then we said, no, that doesn't work, because if we're talking about safe spaces and unsafe space, the people that we need to speak to are the ones that are in power, and that's the male gender. And we need to open it up to them. But you find that they don't engage because they see Muslim women, and the minute they say Muslim women, they're like, oh, the events must be only for Muslim women. That's the misconception. We've had a couple of people say, oh, I thought this was only open for you guys. What's happening? We're like, no, it's open to everyone. Please come, please discuss. But it gets difficult to kind of engage people that don't really have, that don't really have incentive, I would say. Like, everyone has their own issues, and they feel like they don't necessarily need to engage with our discussions. So one of the ways that we were going to try to engage the opposite gender was by introducing someone that was actually male and actually a Muslim and actually an architect or architecture student to speak about it. So, but that didn't actually work out because it was quite last minute and he couldn't make it. Hopefully for the future, though. Sorry, I don't think
But I
answered
just
the
want to say
question.
something, sorry, about specific person that we're talking about. He's been really supportive as well of our organization, and he's got a big following on Instagram, so he's also kind of tried to promote our work as well, and he's invited us over to one of his talks to take part as well. So it's really nice when it's not like a battle or a fight between the sexes. It's more of kind of listening out and kind of seeing how we can help each other where we can. So yeah, I just wanted to add that point as well.
What did you mean when you said, Zahra said, be careful? I kind of missed the point. Really?
Oh, sorry. You know, sometimes, or am I imagining things? Sometimes we want to talk about certain topics that might be controversial in an Islamic way. And it's like, okay, but we need to be careful because
so I say be careful because I know people generally see Islam as one entity, but we have several sects and several cultures. There's a lot of influence of culture in Islam and the way Islam is practiced around the world, and it's difficult for us to kind of say, this is what Islam is about, this is what you should be doing as a woman, this is what you should be doing as a man. It's kind of almost, it's impossible to kind of put a sort of rule book of things when you haven't actually studied the religion as well. And we're not scholars, we're only people that studied architecture, and we're not even good at that. So I keep saying that we need to be careful about bringing religion into it. We need to say that this is the identity that we have, and we're uplifting people that have this identity, but we're not talking about what Islam's specific role is in architecture, because then it changes the entire conversation that we're trying to have, which is that Muslim women can do other things than talk about being Muslims. You know, it's not that we need to always have the conversation about, oh, I'm an architect and I only do things for Muslim women, or I'm an architect and I only do things for my community. I can be an architect, do parametric architecture, and still be a visibly Muslim woman. It's not that I have to always be interested in that side, or not every Muslim woman is an expert on that side to have a conversation about that. I think that's why I was kind of saying we should be careful about not making it completely about the religion.
So I remember I was on a juror this 2-day conference, and I get to select the lectures or seminars or whatever. And so I was reading their description and their course or whatever, and there was one presenter who specified that they only want Black and brown people in the audience. And the conference was about community, urban type of conference. And I loved that idea. And the premise was you were able to freely talk about whatever it is you feel like talking about. 2, that the non-Black and brown people in the audience wouldn't take that information and make it their own. It was a compelling argument, and it was a debate, because it was, on one hand, you're being exclusive, right? And then how are you going to police it? Because you're going to police it. Because it was pretty open. Anybody can go in and out. There really wasn't any check-in or, whatever. So if a non-Black and brown person goes into the audience, how are you going to, would it be a conflict? How would you handle that? And you don't want to, last thing you want is to deal with that. So it was kind of a debate about, should we even have this program or not? This other person was also presenting something else. And so I was the one arguing for it, because it was like, this never happens. This is a conference about community. It's about the Black and brown community, and you want to have that conversation. So we ended up having it, and there was a person that was in that audience, and the person like, listen, this is a discussion for Black and brown people only. And this person walked out. But it was amazing, because first we all identified each other. Like, how do you identify yourself? I identify as a Black Caribbean heterosexual female, like that type of thing. And then they went on and we talked about whatever the topic was. So I think another thing too that drew me to you guys was you created a space. As in, like, you know, they're just like how the BFA created a space. It's like how here in the US, there's this national organization of minority architects. We created a space. Women in architecture, they created a space.
And I think we will at one point. So I think for LFA, we started off by opening it up to the public, because there's something as big as London Festival of Architecture, you know, all of the reasons that Zahra has said, but also we wanted more people could listen in and kind of educate themselves about these issues. But then I think in the future, we spoke about how we will make it just exclusively for Muslim women, because we want these women to feel safe and feel comfortable to open up about their struggles, because you wouldn't feel comfortable, you know, opening up about certain things if there's a man sitting in that room, or if there's someone not from ethnic background. It's like, oh, they won't get it, and if I say something like that, I'll look stupid, and so you'll start gaslighting yourself. I think we realize that, and I think in the future we do hope to do these just Muslim only events, so that these girls, young and old, have the opportunity to kind of voice their struggles in its purest form without sugarcoating it, and they feel comfortable, because I think that's really important. And to make them realize that we're in the same boat, we've probably went through the same thing. And yeah, so that, I think, does that answer your, or does that kind of answer what you were
But we've definitely had that conversation, and we disagreed and agreed and disagreed and agreed. It's about at what point do we open it up to non-Muslim women, and at what point do we keep it just as a conversation for us only? And I think it's healthy to do both. It's good to have it at times where it's just exclusively only for Muslim women in architecture, and it's good at times to have maybe the same discussion again, but with people who are, with engaging people who aren't from that background. Because I remember also, I took part once in a event. It was called Arab Women Artists. Now it was part of that festival, and then we had someone who wasn't an Arab woman take part, and we had a male even take part. And at first I thought, why are we doing this? I don't get it. But then it only took me time afterwards to understand that it's really healthy to have people from different backgrounds who aren't necessarily from the same background as you engaging in these conversations and offering their perspective as well, because it kind of helps you see things from different directions and broaden your insight on certain topics.
And sometimes these people are allies. They're not against you. They're trying to use your platform to help you as well. So
Yeah.
I think that's why having that sort of that opportunity for other people that are not from, you know, that ethnic background or from that religion or whatever, I think, you know, kind of opening it up at some times to allow these people to be allies, to be a part of these conversations, and, you know, they share these values and stuff, because not everyone is out there to get us. There are people, there are good that want to help us and create more diversity. So I think that's why having a balance of the two is important. And I was gonna say something else, but I completely forgot, but hopefully it comes back to me.
What I want to say as well, actually, to add on to that as well, is that if we say that we want to create change within the bigger system, if we're not cooperating with these people from that system and kind of working hand by hand, like I said, these people want to be allies with us, how are we going to create that change if we stay within our own bubble? So we definitely have to do this and that.
Yeah, I remember now what I was going to say. So one thing I noticed with our majlis is that there's this kind of a pattern where in the beginning we have a lot of people that tune in, and there's, I would say, 35 people to about 25 people roughly, the first three, that stay at the beginning and they listen to the presentations, and then I would say in the beginning of the discussion, so like an hour in, they'd stay, but towards the end you would only find like just Muslim women that are at the end, and that's when the conversation gets really interesting and people feel comfortable that, you know, they can see all the faces and you get into like some really, really fruitful like discussions. And that's what happened 2 days ago, you know, day. It was only about 17 of us in the end, and we were like really getting into some deep conversation, and people were feeling comfortable to talk about stuff. And I found this incredible. Like, one of the girls felt comfortable to talk about sexual harassment. Like, she got. Sorry, let me rephrase that. She felt comfortable to share an event that happened to her. She was sexually harassed in Paris, and she felt comfortable enough to share that experience with us on strangers. And, you know, if there were men in that audience, I don't think she would feel as comfortable. I don't know, but I think Rim and Zahra also kind of pointed that out earlier in another meeting, that, you know, creating this space that kind of safe space allowed these girls to open up, and you wouldn't feel comfortable as much to do it if it was mixed, if that makes sense. Yeah, I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah. No, you are. You're making sense.
Okay.
Yeah. So how do... So
everyone's face was all blank. That's why.
Oh yeah, no. So how do people find you?
At the moment, it's just Instagram. Like, our main platform is Instagram at the moment, and we have Twitter, we have Facebook. I think we're most active on Instagram. We publish our events through Eventbrite, and so I guess, you know, if you were to just type in architecture and all that, you know, all of those, it would come up on the feed. But mainly is Instagram at the moment. We're working on our website, which we hope to launch by next month at some point, or end of next month. Did we say? No, I think we next month.
Yeah.
But currently it's just, mainly is Instagram.
Yeah.
Is there a way?
And people, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, other organizations have been really supportive as well by resharing our page on their Instagram, especially Architecture Foundation and so many other organizations that I could literally get their names now. And again, like I said, Hamza from Two Worlds Design, who was going to join us in Last Majlis, but he was really supportive in, you know, sharing our page on his. So it's just about other organizations and groups resharing, and we hope to do the same as well.
Are you guys getting any funding for this?
No.
0. If anybody wants to sponsor us, we're alive and well, and we'd love the money.
There's no grants or anything, or any program?
There are, but we just need to look into them and actually apply for them.
Yeah.
So we need to find the time, because we've just launched it. We're still trying to get our heads around. Sometimes we even, because we're working as well, and sometimes we fall behind and we only publish the Eventbrite page like one day before the actual Majlis. So like, we're still trying to kind of find our feet and manage our time. Yeah, find a balance, definitely, and manage our time better. But once we I think once we're done with the LFA Majalis, we have the Architecture Foundation talk, actually, which we're taking part in, the 100-day studio. But I think once that's all kind of settled down a bit, we're going to definitely look into applying for grants and funds, because it'll be nice to also, you know, expand the team and maybe see where things go. And we were talking about, you know, doing competitions and projects and being more involved in the design process as well.
And at the end of the day, we also want to do research as well, right? Because of course we're getting a lot of information from a lot of people, and at some point, a couple of years down the line, inshallah, we'll be able to do some really good research publications. And I don't know if we've talked about Muslim women. I don't know if the other Muslim women architects, but that's one of the main things that we want to do, is create a database of Muslim women architects that exist, that are doing amazing work, but aren't recognized purely because they don't have the opportunity to, or they're just not on the map because, you know, that other white person is just considered a little bit more important. on judging panels. And I mean, even through this, I used to have this misunderstanding that there weren't many Muslim women out there that were architects or were established, especially in my country, in India. And I found this amazing woman that owns 2 firms and is part of this amazing research project. She graduated from the AA, the Architecture Association in London, and I was like, where the hell were you when I was being educated, man? Like, you know, so it's like you go to the library and there's no way you can find a Muslim woman that actually did stuff. So that's kind of one of the things that we want to do, put us in the library, put us in the books in the library.
Yeah.
And on the internet, like it's
on the internet, yeah.
I mean,
but creating that archive.
Is there anything else?
I see my notes.
Yeah. We made notes.
I think the main thing is just, I have one note here that says reaching out to younger girls at universities, etc. So I think that's basically.
I had that point to make. Sorry, like when I got cut off. When I got cut off, because we were talking about whether or not men should be allowed, but how inclusive and exclusive we can be. And I think at the end of the day, it's just be visible. Regardless of who's being inclusive, who's being exclusive, we'll find a way to include people at some points. We'll find a way to exclude people at some points when it's necessary. I'm pretty sure Reem and Tahin's already mentioned this, but at the end of the day, it's being visible, being present, taking up space, telling people that we're here, we're doing this thing, you know, we're architects, we're architectural designers, we're here to tell you that these people existed long and before we actually started this organization. You just did not listen. You know, you just did not search for it and you didn't bother to educate other people about it. So we're here to do that for you.
So I'm not aware of any groups here in the US. That doesn't mean that they don't exist. It's just I'm not aware of any. Is there any advice you would give a Muslim woman that's in this profession right now?
Oh. Can we each give an advice? Is that how? Should we do it like that? Yeah.
Oh, I mean,
oh my gosh.
I'm to give advice.
A piece of advice,
or at least from doing what you're doing right now with your organization, or at the very least, any topics that keep coming up that you keep hearing over and over again.
I think, well, I won't really say advice, but this sort of lesson that I've learned, not lesson, I mean, that's a big thing, but kind of something that I've observed is that how courageous I've become since starting this up. And the only reason I've been courageous is because I've started seeing and actually looking for Muslim women that are, you know, established in the architecture field. And then it gives me this courage to say that, oh yeah, I can do this too. Like I can eventually do this and I will probably succeed at it. So advice would be search it up, look for the people that you want to, that represent you. It'll be hard, it'll be difficult, but they are there.
My advice would be don't think you're not worth of taking that position or putting your hand up when someone says who wants to do this, for example. So I remember we used to have what was it called? Studio representatives. So each studio at the university had a representative that would take part in a monthly meeting or something like that with the head of the school, and they would discuss, and what they would do is they would discuss like any pressing issues within the studio or the university, or anything, any topics or discussions that come up. So you would ask your studio, do you guys have anything that you want to raise? And I can go and basically talk about that during the meeting. So I thought, why not? Let me put my hand up and let me put myself forward. What's stopping me? And actually turned out no one else wanted to do it. So it was kind of like, okay, perfect. So I'll do that. And then it was good, because sometimes as Muslim women with a scarf on our heads, we feel that we need to kind of blur in the background and not kind of be too visible, because if we do anything stupid or wrong or say something, they might hold this is kind of all in our heads, but we think they will hold it against us, or maybe they would, I don't know, but not to have that thought. We all make mistakes and we all say silly things at one point in our lives, but you just grow from that afterwards. So I thought, okay, let me just go ahead with it and you know, be out there, be, like Zahra was saying, be visible. And from then on, people associated me with that person who, you know, and then the next year came and they were like, okay, we need to choose a studio representative. Who should it be? And everyone just kind of looked at me. And so basically put yourself out there, and people will think of you when they need something, or when they want to, or when they want to have a talk, and or whatever it is, you'll come to their minds because they've seen you out there doing something already. So, and don't be afraid, and you've got time to develop and grow, even if you think that you're not up there yet. I mean, no one started off up there, everyone worked their way eventually at one point. So yeah, be heavily involved in especially at university. That's kind of like your it's an easier place to kind of enter that networking environment. So take it and run with it, and it will help you in the long run. And if you haven't done it, it's not too late to do it. Just get involved. Like, for example, in the UK, we have the Royal Institute of British Architects. It will be really good to kind of, if you didn't have that chance to get involved at university, you can still do it now by volunteering or taking part in whatever they have. Just that would be my advice. Make yourself visible, make yourself known.
And me, okay, I would say to a young Muslim girl starting up in architecture, I would say, don't let anyone steal your thunder. This industry will tell you to be a certain way, to lose your values, change your views and all that. But I would say stick to those, if, you believe in your values, and hold on to them. And I speak of this from experience, because I remember when I started off in the architecture industry, fresh out of uni, I was told by so many people to take my headscarf off. Muslim women, that the very few that I did know that were in the industry, they would be telling me, take the hijab off because you won't become successful with it on. I had family members, not my parents, thankfully, but I had family members telling me, you should take the headscarf off because you'll never make it as an architect. Like, you won't become successful. You won't be able to, go far in your industry if you do that. And for a while there, I thought, oh my goodness, I have to do this. I spent so long chasing a career in architecture. I did 3 years, and I want to go even further. If I want to do that, if I want to become successful, I'm going to have to take this headscarf off. And for me, it was a huge decision. I couldn't, because wearing the headscarf, this is my choice. This is a part of my identity. I want to, taking that off would have been a huge deal for me. And I went through so much, months. I was going over it and over it. And then in the end, it was actually white English lady that worked in the practice office that I was working in. She hired me, and she was saying how that if you don't want to work with people that just fixates on how you look or how you choose to practice your religion, or your values don't align with theirs, you don't want to work with people like that. The people that you want to work for are those that look at you for your skills, the skills that you have, your degrees, you as an architect, not how you look. Okay, a lot of people are so fixated on, oh, this person is going to represent my company, they have to look a certain way, they have to dress a certain way, they have to talk a certain way. Okay, there are some aspects that you need to obviously consider, but how a person chooses to practice their religion, how a person chooses to practice, just stuff like this, like religion or culture, whatever, you shouldn't really have a say in that. The woman that told me this, she was saying that you don't want to work with people like that, and just hold on to your values, hold on to what you believe is true, and the right people will choose you. And you don't want to end up you don't want to change yourself and conform to what the whole industry is telling you to be like. dress a certain way, look a certain way, talk a certain way. Just hold on to those values. And so that's why I say, don't let anyone steal your thunder. Know your self-worth, because, oh my gosh, 8 years in, 9 years in, the amount of, nonsense that I had to go through, and I'm sure there will be more. There will be so much more in the future. You have to kind of develop a thick skin, and so for someone that's just very young, it's going to be challenging. But if you're passionate about architecture and you want to pursue a career in architecture, go for it. But don't let what these people say get to you. Don't let what they say dishearten you. There's people out there, people have done this, there has been other Muslim women that have pursued a career in architecture and they are successful. And so, MWAs hopefully will be a platform that will be that support, even if it's the tiniest little bit.
Can I add a point as well, just really, really quickly, which is on just carrying on from what Leah said. Also, like you will most likely face points where you will fail or fall down and find yourself at your lowest point within your career. I think we've all been through that. But my personal advice would be, don't wait for someone to pick you up. You have to kind of like lift yourself up by yourself. Don't look up to anyone. Let yourself be the highest inspiration at that moment so that you can actually get through it. Which is what I had to do personally, and really just focus on myself, on my self-growth within personally as an architect within the field, but also the kind of work that I was doing. I had to kind of like establish myself in that as well. So try and find yourself in the career and let yourself be the main inspirational drive.
Is RIM short for something?
No, it's actually Reem, and it means baby gazelle. What's that character in the Bambi? Yeah, basically a Bambi. But when my dad wanted to register my name, he said, he thought to himself, okay, I'll say it and I'll say Reem, and I'll let because it was a white lady, he thought, oh, she'll probably know how to write it properly so that it will work out in school, mm-hmm. in a white system. So he said Reem and she wrote RIM. And yeah, it's just been RIM. It's been rim, or it's been
that's
rim
horrible.
bim, or rim of perimeter in school. Everyone would look at me and it's kind of like, okay, that's enough. But
we call her Rim as well sometimes, and like I have moments where I call her Reem because I have friends named Reem, and then her name is actually spelled Rim. So then I got confused the first time I met her. I was like, I'm not sure if your name is Rim or Reem, and I don't know what the difference is in Arabic, but yeah,
it's Reem. Yeah,
I call her Rim, and I've known years, and I'm sorry, I should start calling you Reem then.
No, Rim is what I go by, to be honest. Only Arab people call me Reem, so sometimes like Zahra says Reem, so it's fine. I'm both work, so yeah.
Yeah, and for me, like I said before, I've got two names. Tahin, what is my given name, and my grandparents gave me that name, and Leah, my mom gave me that name, and I prefer Leah because it sounds more feminine, whereas Tahin is kind of a neutral kind of name, but you can't really tell if it's a feminine or masculine name, so I prefer to go with Leah. But even with Leah, people don't even know how to pronounce that correctly. It's like, is it Leah? Is it Leah? And then I kind of gave up in the middle and I just let people call me whatever. So like personally, I prefer to be called Leah. And I think nowadays, because I've got so many people calling me Leah now, and if I hear anyone call me Tahin, I cringe a little. It's like, oh, I just don't like being associated with the name Tahin. But at the same time, I refuse to change it though. I could have, changed it by now, but almost out of respect for my grandparents, I've kept it. And so, so it's just always, in the beginning, it's always a little bit awkward trying to explain to people, I've got two names, you can choose which one you want to call me, but I prefer Leah. But yeah.
You guys have such interesting stories about your names. I'm just like, yeah, my name means flower, that's it. My aunt gave me that name.
That's nice.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for
the
having
opportunity.
us.
Yeah, and giving us this opportunity to talk to you about our experiences. It's been incredible.
I made new friends.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
It was really lovely talking. Like you need to come on. You need to come on our Majalis.
Yeah,
I've been trying to catch it, but it's work. Like.
Oh yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Hopefully the last one will be a little bit more accessible. We're trying to figure out timings.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
All right, guys.
Oh.
All right.
Bye.
Good night.
You too.
Good night.
Okay. All right. Bye.
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 Hey, listeners! I have an exciting announcement. I decided to launch a membership program for the show, where you have a chance to support me and the show directly. I love creating the show, and it means the world to me that you all tune in to keep hearing me week after week. But it takes an immense amount of time and energy to produce. I want to keep the show going, and I want to invest in its growth. And I also want you to become a partner with me in this journey. That's why I'm excited to give you a chance to officially become a supporter of the show at glow.fm/archispolly, ArchISPolly, or by clicking the link in the show notes. It's quick and easy. It takes less than 30 seconds and just takes clicking a link in the show notes and using Apple or Google Pay. You don't have to create any new logins, and you can contribute as much or as little as you like. If this show is part of your day or week, and you like what I'm doing, then visit glow.fm/archispolly, all one word, and support me and the show in any way you can today.